Oh my, are tubes really over? Are you having trouble getting a hold of vacuum tubes for your amplifiers? A lot of stuff has gone on lately. It's getting harder to find those tubes. So I'm kind of touching the third rail here, talking about vacuum tubes and audio. I'm not an audiophile. I'm certainly not an equipment manufacturer or distributor. I am an engineer and a hobbyist. I've been building tube equipment since I was a kid, a teenager. And I think I can talk a little bit to the industry by just, looking at some of the trends, reading some things online, and getting a flavor for when we might be able to get tubes. Now, I have worked with, I guess you'd call an audiophile god. When I was a co-op student, I got exposed to this extreme form of audio. I know that most of you are concerned about keeping valves or tubes in your equipment, but let me tell you, the manufacturers are even more concerned. And the new old stock, of course, that we treasure is slowly being whittled away at, and eventually the new old stock will be gone. But manufacturers really need new production, new tubes to be produced for their new equipment. Occasionally on this channel I will say something that's ridiculous or stupid. I'll make these overreaching arguments about how we have so many vacuum tubes that have been manufactured over the years that we will never run out. We can't possibly use them all up. I've got piles of tubes that I'll never use in my lifetime. I'm going to have to pass on to somebody else. That kind of thing. Well, let's consider why tubes exist. They exist for one reason. Somebody needed to make some money. Okay, we're talking about manufacturing something that you can sell for a higher price and make a profit. That's what vacuum tubes are all about. It's as simple as that. From the very start, once they got out of the laboratory and got into the manufacturing plant, tubes became a way to make money as an electronic component. So if you understand that, you understand why it's getting harder and harder to find a decent tube manufacturing site. Now, we've had some bad luck, but let's be honest about this. Probably for the last 60 years, the early 60s really, when semiconductors really started to take off, tubes have been in decline. And the profitability of tubes in general has been in decline. So, yeah, we've got a lot of surplus. A lot of devices are not in use anymore. They've all been trashed. They don't need those tubes. But, during the 80s, there started to be a revival of the tube sound. And I'm talking about guitar amplifiers and hi-fi amplifiers and so on. These were new manufacturers that needed new devices to put into their amplifiers. So a lot of the tube operations did live on longer than they probably would have or should have, and a few manufacturers were revived. I'll give you an example. The Tesla tube factory in Slovakia, then Czechoslovakia. During the split up, they had to shut down their tube facility. It did not survive, but somebody picked up the pieces. Some of the, this happens a lot of times when companies go under. Some of the principals, the engineers, they want to rebuild the company, and that's what happened. And we ended up with JJ Elektronik in Slovakia. It's probably the last fully functional tube manufacturing facility able to do high-quality vacuum tubes. Today, in 2022, that factory is still making vacuum tubes. They are using mostly the old Tesla equipment, believe it or not. They just bought out the equipment, probably at low cost, and started up the operation again under a new name. There have been some other manufacturers that have come along and have built some tubes specifically for this audio market, guitar amps, hi-fi amps. An example is the Sino Shugong company. Here's a tube that I bought, probably 5 years ago. These are tubes that are quite popular now. This is the 211 triode. This 211 triode, of course, it's a Chinese triode. This was originally built in the United States. This is a highly prized tube for audio amplifiers. A pair of these will give you probably a 50 to 100 watt amplifier, depending on the class AB that you're running it in. In class A, you can probably get something like this to put out maybe 10 watts RMS. But very low mu triode and still a wonderful tube. This Shugong tube, by the way, is excellent quality. The suspension on this tube, the construction, the thick glass, this is a beautifully manufactured tube in any era, by the way. Now, does this have anything to do with what the tube sounds like, what audio characteristics you might desire? I can't get into that. Now you're getting into the religion of tube sound, and the point of this video is not to touch that, but to simply talk about the availability of tubes. So, unfortunately, the Shugong company, under the Sino brand, had a catastrophic fire in 2019. They promised they would rebuild, and just about that time, COVID broke out. And as far as I know, they have not rebuilt, and in fact have sold the land to maybe build a hotel. That's what I'm hearing now. So we do not have those manufacturers that we thought we had. And the double whammy of the economy, COVID, and catastrophic situations have shut down many of the plants, along with political things that have happened. So you're going to have problems finding tubes. Here's an 811. There's no more Sylvania plant making 811s. You're not going to find a plant in the United States building 811s anymore. But, these things, at one time, you unrolled it, and out came a beautiful 811 tube for your amplifier. So there is a Western Electric line in Georgia that is threatening to get back into the tube game. It's kind of funny how tubes left the United States and now maybe they're returning to the United States. Anyway, let's talk about tubes a little bit in this video. Let's talk about if there is any hope, or are we giving up on tubes completely? So Mike, are you telling me that I might not have a 12AU7 for my vacuum tube voltmeter? Is it really that bad? Well, no, it's not that bad. There's plenty of these small peanut tubes around. We'll never really run out of these in this century. But rather, let's talk about power tubes, power amplifier tubes. That seems to be where all the fun is as far as tubes needing to be replaced. Because remember, it's those tubes that take the most abuse. So, power amplifier tubes take the most abuse. They're running hot, they're trying to deliver power to a load, and you're playing music through them. This is a Type 45. These were commonly used in jukeboxes and output stages of high-performance receivers, from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And these tubes, either single-ended or push-pull, they take a lot of abuse. So you are going to find Type 45s and Type 10s and Type 71As and other audio output tubes that are going to test bad because they've had their useful life. They no longer have the amount of gain they used to have. Yes, these do go bad. So unlike all those small miniature tubes that we have, and many of the octals and loctal tubes, they just seem to last forever. That's because they're well built and they're being used well within their specifications, and they will last forever practically, many lifetimes. So the reality is this Type 27 tube, which is new in the box, I always like to show off new stuff. It's a brand new tube. It's never been taken out of the case. Brand new Type 27 tube. If you put that in your tube tester or in your radio, and here's a Type 27 that's been through the war. This thing's been used and pulled and put into other radios, probably since the 20s. Both of these tubes are perfectly good. They're not going to go bad anytime soon. Now, if you take large power amplifier tubes, like these 813s, okay, these are really nice beam power pentodes developed just before the war in the late 30s, you will find that these have taken some abuse because these are power amplifier tubes trying to put RF into the antenna. There could be mismatches, broken antennas, there could be flak or machine gun fire that could have damaged the transmitter these were in, and maybe they got over dissipated and they weren't tuned up right. So I've got one here marked low ART13. Here's a tube that we know is low, and it doesn't mean he's dead. It just means he's not putting out as much power as he was specified for. I'd expect to get 100 watts out of an ART13 using one of these tubes, and maybe this guy's only putting out 60 watts. So he's low. Okay, that's the way power amplifier tubes go. They generally don't just die. They go down in performance, and you start to notice that you're not putting out as much RF energy, power, or the audio is starting to sound funny on the speakers. So you need to replace your audio output tubes. So forgive the CD caddy here. I'm just using it to hold these 6L6s. I think this all started with the EL34 Philips tube, which was a true power pentode in the early 50s. This tube was put into everything from PA systems to high-end stereo equipment, high-end amplifiers, guitar amplifiers, and so on. And Philips had a pretty good patent on that power amplifier. So the American designers came up with the 6L6. And the 6L6 is actually not a pentode. It's a beam power tetrode, because technically the beam forming plates are not suppressor grids. So it's really a beam power tetrode. And some people say the 6L6 or the 5881, which is the ruggedized version, have a better sound than the ELs, but I don't know because I don't know anything about sound. Now at the same time, the military wanted a metallized version, and if you stuck these metallized 6L6s into your amplifier, you'd still get the power output. It would still sound okay, be fine for a PA type amplifier, maybe for your school, but it might not have the emotional sounds that you're looking for with your guitar amplifier. So I just wanted to show off a metal 6L6. Also more ruggedized 6L6s such as this 1614 come along, and these are for industrial type amplifiers, early high power operational amplifiers, and PA systems. So just a spread of 6L6s. There's an endless variety of both antique and modern versions of these tubes. For your boutique amplifier, you can choose the manufacturer of your choice. Choose any manufacturer that gives you the best sound on these 6L6s. Very popular tube all around the world. Now, who's manufacturing these tubes today? Who's left to manufacture these tubes? There sure is a lot of stock out there. If you go out to the distributors, you'll see 6L6s from probably 20 different manufacturers. But who's really still building 6L6s. So you might notice in this presentation I've been avoiding talking about actual amplifier designs or topologies, such as the classes or bias of amplifiers, or single-ended versus push-pull, class B, whatever. But I do have to at least mention the hybrid amplifier idea, where we try to use the best characteristic of each type of device in the best way to produce the best amplifier. Here's an example of a hybrid where we're using the tube in the front end as the preamplifier, and we're using a pair of MOSFETs in complementary symmetry to produce the power, and then we have an op-amp integrated circuit that provides the feedback path. So there's all kinds of technologies involved here. That's a hybrid. Now this hybrid takes advantage of a low-cost, readily available preamplifier tube. The other way around, you have the low-end or low-level parts, such as the amplifiers, that are just amplifying voltages solid state, and you make the tube part the power amplifier part to get the full tube richness that you're looking for in the output stage instead. So that's, when you hear the word hybrid, that's what we're talking about. It's like a hybrid car. It's taking two different technologies, three different technologies, putting them together to get the best out of both of them or all three of them. Okay, here's where you guys get to poke fun, call out mistakes that I'm making, cry foul, and so on in the comments. I'm going to try to take you through the existing vacuum tube manufacturing sites worldwide in 2022, after all of the events that have happened over the past 3 or 4 years. And let's see what we can work out here. So the first place I want to go over is JJ Electronic in the Slovak Republic. Some manufacturers are claiming that this may be the only place left where you can get full complements of tubes for complete amplifiers. In other words, the entire lineup, from the front-end preamplifier tubes to the drivers, to the rectifiers, to the power amp tubes themselves. So a complete one-stop shop. This is really what manufacturers, repair shops, and people that are handling amplifiers to refurb them for guitar amplifiers and so on, they're looking for the full boat. They want the full complement of tubes at reasonable prices. Next, we'll talk about shutdowns. There's a lot of opinions going around. All of the information I have comes off blogs and off the internet. You can't believe everything you hear on the internet. A lot of rumors and opinions. The lines produced by shutdowns are classic. These have been used for many years. Many of the old names are being rebranded, and very successful, very modest priced tube line, and again a complete tube line handling every part of the amplifiers. And you'll recognize some of these tubes. No surprise there. The question is it shutdown or shutdowns? Shutdown forever. Next, let's talk about EH, owned by New Sensor from New York. This is a Russian manufacturer. Their lines are also very popular and involve buying up many of the tube capacity in the former Soviet Republic and in Russia, and putting them all together into the EH line. A lot of very popular tubes and equipment are coming out of EH, and All of these should be familiar to you. Again, producing devices that are reasonably priced and available for the market. Now, unfortunately, with the recent Ukraine war and the sanctions, it became difficult to get valves from Electro-Harmonics. Supposedly there are workarounds and tubes are again shipping. We shall see. Okay, next, PS Vane. This is a Chinese manufacturer, probably related to some of the shoe gang. They have a good selection of valves, and it's pretty apparent that they're going after the broader market. These are all popular tubes coming out of China. So normally I would not mention a company like Western Electric because I wanted to cover boutique manufacturers separately, but I'm going to nod to Western Electric because they're claiming that they want to get into the market seriously and provide a full complement of vacuum tubes, just as the companies that we've just gone over do. And this will take them from the boutique market into the mainstream manufacturing market for vacuum tubes. This is a big step. We think that Western Electric will get beyond the 300B and will begin to get into tubes like the 6SN7, 12AX7, and so on. And when they begin to price these reasonably for the manufacturers, they will transform from a boutique house to a regular manufacturing house for tubes, and we'll see how this works out. So let's talk about boutique manufacturers. Now these are in all over the world. You'll notice that some of these valves are a little bit cruder. They're hand blown, some of them. They're going to look a lot of gold on them, a lot of fancy packaging, because you're paying a premium. These are more for the audiophile set, less for the manufacturers. And here's a few of them listed. KR Audio in Czech Republic, Emission Labs, also Czech, Elrog in Germany, TAD, Takastui, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Sophia Electric, Brimar in the UK, and Linlai in China. So here's KR Audio. You can see how the tubes look a little bit more interesting. Here's Emission Labs. Kind of interesting what they're doing here. Saving the world from solid state. I love that. Wow, look at this. Elrog. A definitely German-looking device here to pump the tube. And here's TAD producing these red base EL34s. Very interesting. This is a new exclusive production facility. Production facility. That's what we're talking about here. Not reselling, not rebranding. New production facilities. That's what we're looking for. Takasuki. Takasuki looks like it's got some beautiful valves and some interesting amplifiers. Here's a single-ended Class A power amp. Sophia Electric. These look like possibly new old stock tubes. Let's see if they can come out with some tubes of their own. I believe they all already have some valves that they are producing. Brimar. Now this comes out of a Great British Valve project. And this is really interesting. Read through this. We're not going to stick here. But they're trying to resurrect the Brimar brand,
so that tube production can commence again in the United Kingdom. And they're working on some pretty great tubes, starting with the 12AX7 and 300B. Let's see how Braemar does. Will they become a standard tube manufacturer, or will they just be a boutique manufacturer? And finally, Lin Lai. These are fancy looking valves, and definitely something that would look good in an amplifier. So before we end this video, I want to talk about glass. The glass used in vacuum tubes that are pumped very, very tightly for a vacuum. It's pretty special stuff. And if you don't use the correct glass, you will not be able to get that vacuum or have the shock resistance that vacuum tubes have. You know, vacuum tubes hit the floor. They have high vibration environments. The glass used in tubes is very special. And right now, there's only one factory making this type of glass, and it's in Germany.
So don't shoot the messenger. Yes, your 12AX7 and your 6L6 and your 211s and the larger devices that you're using in your 1 kilowatt audio amplifier, yes, some of those are going away because we simply don't have the manufacturers. But I do have some good news. As long as there is a demand for these tubes, for these valves, there will be someone who will try to figure out how to make money by manufacturing them. So let's see what happens in 2023 and see if some factories begin to come back online. After the upheaval, after COVID, maybe the economy gets a little bit funny and it's time to maybe start building a tube factory or reviving a tube factory to deliver these audio amplifier tubes that we need for our amplifiers, both guitar and hi-fi.